Good afternoon, everyone. We are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to our first Continuing the Conversation interview. I am beyond excited that we have all of you here today, and can't tell you how excited I am to hear from Judge Parker and Sean Brown. We are really in for a treat today. My name is Jennifer Ryback. I practice at McGuire, Craddock, and Strother, and I have the incredible honor to serve as president of the Dallas Association of Young Lawyers this year. And as hopefully you have heard by now, my little kitschy theme for the year is good, better, best. In 2018, DAYL is really focused on making young lawyers the absolute best they can be. And as part of that, we have a lot of things coming up for the year that are focused on that, including our second chair program, our Trial Skills CLE series, and lots of other things that we have planned. But just a couple of months ago, when I was kind of taking stock of the events that we had coming up for the year, I realized I was missing an opportunity to address a huge issue, in my opinion. As we noted in some of the marketing for this event, just last summer, the New York Times wrote an article about even though women are making progress in terms of getting into law school and graduating from law school, we're still not seeing that 50-50 parity in terms of equity partnerships and judge positions and things like that. So, it's obvious that this is still an issue that needs to be addressed. And we have so many remarkable women lawyers here in Dallas. We're very lucky. And to me, it just made sense that we try to harvest what we have right in our backyard. And I thought it would be interesting to bring this to you in sort of an interview format, hopefully a little bit more casual, and really get to hear some neat things. I will tell you, I brainstormed my dream pie-in-the-sky list of women that I wanted to feature and my list of interviewers that I wanted to have interview those women, and every single one of them said yes. So to me, that says they're eager to share their story about what they've been able to accomplish in their careers, and I think they're passionate about this issue as well. So big thank you to the Dallas Women Lawyers Association for partnering with us to bring this program to you. And another big thank you to the Texas Young Lawyers Association, and their president-elect, Sally Pretorius, has been instrumental in getting this recorded today. So we hope to bring it to availability online at some point in the future. So stay tuned for that. If you know folks that didn't come today and wanted to see it, we hope to make that available soon. And lastly, as most of you in the room know, and I think she already left the room because she's probably going somewhere to work on something else, but nothing that we do in the DAYL would be possible without our fantastic executive director, Sherry Harris. So if you see her, thank you so much. She is the most incredible resource that our organization has. So if you see her around, be sure to tell her thank you, not just for programs like this, but for everything that she does on a daily basis. Now, without further ado, I am pleased to interview the first pair that we have today. Both of these women are truly exceptional and so well known in our legal community. I'm going to keep my words brief so you can hear from them. Judge Tanya Parker presides over the 116th Civil District Court here in Dallas County, of course. Judge Parker has been named Trial Judge of the Year by the Dallas chapter of the American Board of Trial Advocates, and she has won both the DAYL Outstanding Young Lawyer and the DAYL Outstanding Mentor Awards, among many, many other accolades. She works tirelessly in her courtroom and in the community, and we are lucky to have her with us today. Interviewing Judge Parker will be Sean Brown. Sean is a partner at Lynn Pinker, Cox & Hurst, and is one of the most well-respected and successful business trial lawyers here in Dallas. She has been selected as a Best Lawyer in Dallas by D Magazine, a Texas Super Lawyer by Texas Monthly, and was named to the National Black Lawyers Top 100. Sean also has a long history of bar service and will serve just a few years from now as our Dallas Bar Association president. So, without further ado, it is my distinct honor to turn it over to Sean Brown.
Well, thank you to Jennifer and to DAYL and DWLA and to Texas Young Lawyers for hosting these events because this is an amazing conversation. My excitement comes because I get to ask the question and Judge Parker answers the questions. This is a role reversal, except it is being recorded, so I promise I'll be good. So, Judge, this is a particular treat for me because Judge Parker and I attended law school together. So we have definitely been through lots of things and in the trenches, and luckily have just been able to follow her amazing success. So, speaking of law school, I would really just kind of want to start there as a point to ask you sort of, how did you navigate law school for whatever that first job out of law school would be, and then tell them about your first job.
First of all, thank you all for having me and for coming. I know everybody has busy schedules, so it's wonderful to have such a great attendance today. With regard to law school, since we're starting there, I have to mention first year, everybody remembers how horrible the first year of law school is, particularly the first year of exams. And I always embarrass Sean by telling this story. But we were all in the library, Underwood Law Library at SMU, studying for our exams. And my birthday is in May, and so most years of my life it has fallen during exam period. And when law school exams are going on, everybody's on edge and really not very friendly. Sean knocked on the little door where I was studying, and I turned around and she had a card and was the only person who had remembered that it was my birthday as we were preparing for one of the biggest exams that we were all going to take. And I think that that is a real testament to who she is as a person, both who she was then and who she is now. So I'm delighted to be on the stage with my former classmate who now practices before the court on a regular basis, which is also a treat. The first job out of law school for me, when I was in law school, my first clerkship opportunity came through a fellow classmate, an upperclassman, a 3L, who had mentored me and given me some tips on moot court and mock trial. And she clerked at a law firm in downtown Dallas, and they didn't have a formal on campus interview process, but they pretty much found their clerks through their former clerks. And so she recommended me for the position. I went down, got interviewed, and got the opportunity, and ended up staying with that firm until I left to go on to Gruber Hurst in 2007.
And so I recall you in law school being just like you are as a judge today, very committed. You had a schedule, you had a plan. So the question is, did you always know you wanted to be a judge?
One of the things that was fortunate for me about the firm that I began my career with is that both of the principals in the firm, Kevin Wiggins and Ron White, they both were former judges. And Ron, in particular, had a lot of relationships and a hand in helping women, certain women who were in the judiciary at that time, including our now Chief Justice Carolyn Wright, ascend to the bench. And so being in that environment and being in a place where I got to sort of be an understudy to people who had been on the bench before definitely started to plant a seed within me. But what I also learned from the fact that Ron and Kevin had started that firm is that at that time, the courthouse, everyone who was on the bench at the courthouse was of a political party different from the one that I'm affiliated with. And so I kind of put it in the back of my head because I was not willing to switch parties in order to pursue the bench. And I just sort of tucked it away and thought that it would not be something that would be a reality. That, of course, changed in 2006 when there was a sea change at the courthouse. Along political lines, and after that, I realized that there might be some opportunity to pursue that dream.
So you've always talked with great admiration for not only your time at White and Wiggins, but about both Kevin Wiggins and Ron White and the impact that that had on your career. Can you talk a little bit about your experience at the firm and ultimately your election to the partnership?
Kevin and Ron, for me, were really like having both mentors and parents in the workplace. I learned so much from them on both levels, personally and professionally, that it just was a dynamic environment to grow and to be developed as a young lawyer. And they were so committed to building the largest minority-owned firm in the state, had aspirations of extending that nationally, and I wanted to be a part of that. I thought that was very special. We were doing work that lawyers of color didn't often have the opportunity to do, representing Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 corporations in commercial and tort litigation. And Ron also recognized that it was important for everybody to know how to handle certain types of cases. And so he would cherry pick other cases and give those to me so that I would have the opportunity to also know what it's like to prosecute a case on behalf of a plaintiff, or to represent a nonprofit, or to represent a governmental entity. And so I just got a wonderful, broad experience with them, and they were just so committed to developing young lawyers. That commitment remains with them today. And I think you see really the contribution they've made to our bar when you look at where the lawyers who went to that firm first, where we have all ended up. It really is just a direct testament to who they are and what their commitment and personal sacrifice has been.
You talked about the clerkship program not being traditional, meaning, you kind of got in by someone who was already working there. And I would imagine that the partnership track likewise was not a traditional route. There's 8 years or 7 years or what have you. But can you talk about how you were able to navigate to the level of partner at the firm?
Yeah, the firm was, we regularly had about 8 to 10 lawyers, and so it was a small firm, but the partnership track, they did have a written partnership track, and in the written policy, it talked about the fact that you needed to at least be at 8 years, and of course, a certain level of book of business and client relationships and so on and so forth. And at about 6.5 years, I felt like I had everything going for me on the policy other than the 8 years. And so I petitioned to have the opportunity to be considered for the partnership at that point, because I felt like this 8-year number is arbitrary. And moreover, it might be a testament in some way to the work that I do if I've been able to achieve these other things in a shorter time frame. So I asked to be considered, and was very grateful that they not only considered me but elected me to the partnership at that point. Yeah.
And you, one thing I didn't mention about law school is the fact that Judge Parker and I participated in a number of moot court and mock trial competitions. We were on the same team in the sense that we trained together, but we were not ever on the same team as competitors. We were against one another. She beat me every single time. The good part, though, for SMU is that we always ended up in the finals going head-to-head against each other. But as you were talking about the arbitrary nature of the written policy and your presenting argument, I'm sure in your awesome 3 points that you laid out, I remember that you had 5 points, and you were the best at the impact statement, I recall, from moot court arguments. You always left with something. And so that to me is just sort of a testament of who you are in terms of impact. So being, I would presume, the first person to come forth at 6.5 years and present the 5-point argument, how was that received, particularly, and then how did you come up with your manner of asking? And I sort of tie this to Jennifer's point of it's a common statement that women don't ask. But you certainly don't fit any particular mold, so you decided to go forth. How did you make that decision? And then did you consult with anyone to sort of get together what it is that you wanted to say?
Well, as it turns out, years before, I'd had the good fortune of being on a committee as a co-chair with our now bar president, Michael Hurst. That's in fact how Michael and I met. At the time, he had a knee injury that kept him from driving, and so our very first meeting, I went to his office and went over to visit with him and just started talking about our committee activities and seeing the condition that he was in, I basically said, listen, you don't have to do anything. I'll do everything with regard to our committee. And Michael liked that, and so we became fast friends. What
Familiar with that.
happened is that yeah, you have that position now. What happened though is that I continued even after our committee work to reach out to Michael and visit with him about various aspects of my professional development, and he was a great mentor to me and gave me a lot of great advice. And one of the things that he and I talked about in terms of performance reviews is that, you know, it was important for me to keep a running track of the things that I had done between the last performance review and the current performance review. And so I had, you know, all sorts of spreadsheets that showed the ways in which I tried to expand myself as a lawyer, the things that I did that year that were different from the year before to show the interest that I had in growing as a professional, the things I did outside of the law in terms of community involvement, because I knew that was extremely important to Ron and Kevin, and of course it was important to me. But as women, I think sometimes we assume people know what we're doing. People assume that we're doing, but they don't always know what we're doing. And so it's often uncomfortable for us to tell people what we're doing. It seems, you know, self-aggrandizing, and we just aren't comfortable doing it. But in a performance review setting, in a partnership evaluation setting, you have to come to the table with the details. And so I was grateful for the time that I'd been mentored by Michael, where I was encouraged to really keep track of the things that I was doing. And then when the time came, I was able to bring that information forward. And I encourage everybody here to do that. In the moment that you're doing it, it feels silly to have a spreadsheet of all the panels you speak on, or all the articles that you've written, or the different pro bono cases that you've had. But I promise you, this profession at many points in time will require you to list out those things and to draw upon those experiences for other experiences. And so that's what was really helpful to me.
I think that's key, and that's something that I did as I came up for partner, but I wished I had done as a younger associate because there were so many things I probably forgot.
Well, and let me just also add, you know, if you aspire to the judiciary, whether federal or state level, again, having that history and having it already logged is going to help you in terms of responding to the various questionnaires. The Committee for Qualified Judiciary questionnaire that the Dallas Bar requires, if you submit to that process, you to complete, it's extensive. If you are interested in a federal bench opportunity, the background information is extensive. So if you already have it in the works at the start of your career, it just makes it so much easier when you're trying to move on to other opportunities.
So you mentioned Michael Hurst, so I think we'll go there next. You were successful in your pitch to partnership at White & Wiggins. You enjoyed being a member of the partnership there with Kevin and Ron and others. And then did you stay at White & Wiggins?
I didn't. So in the fall of 2007, and again, I enjoyed my time there immensely, but the reality that I had to appreciate is that it did not offer any more opportunities for growth for me in the ways that I wanted to grow. And a good friend of mine who's now at the civil section of the DA's office, when I told her about the opportunity with the Gruber Hurst firm, she told me, if you come back, I'm going to lock the door. Because that's only you wanting to be complacent and be comfortable in the space that you are. It's not you making the best decision for your career. And the opportunity that Gruber Hurst offered me that was different, because I highly recommend that as you're looking at professional opportunities, that you're looking for ways to expand yourself, not to repeat what you just did in another professional environment. But the opportunity for growth that Gruber Hurst offered me, aside from being able to work with Jay Chill. That's what I call Jonathan Childers. He's Jay Chill to me. But the opportunity that it offered was different types of clients. Gruber Hurst had, in terms of the kinds of clients, very different. It wasn't heavy with Fortune 500 companies. It was more entrepreneurs, investment companies, high net worth individuals who had put their heart and soul into starting a business, like Stream Energy, for example, where, it's a multi-million-dollar, if not billion-dollar company, but Rob Schneider is the client that you're talking to, and his heartbeat is that company. And when that company gets sued, he doesn't make the business decision to settle. He wants to go try it. And so it represented a different environment because you had clients who had direct skin in the game. It wasn't, people who are sort of making the business decision to resolve things and not take it to trial. Although I had great trial experiences at White and Wiggins, I wanted to try larger cases. I wanted to try different cases, and Gruber Hurst gave me that opportunity. So Michael had been recruiting me and expressing interest in me joining the firm he was with prior to starting Gruber Hurst, and I had kept just, no, I like where I am. I'm doing, things are going well. I'd like to stay here. But this particular opportunity that he presented to me was one that it was just the right time. It was a great opportunity for me to expand, and so I took it.
So you talked about obviously the relationship that you developed, the admiration that you have for Kevin Wiggins and Ron White. That being your first job out of law school, they elected you to the partnership sort of off the track that they had established, and you still have a great relationship, honor, and respect for both of them and them for you. How did you navigate the conversation with them when you made the decision to leave? And then additionally, that feeling of loyalty, the feeling complacent, and the, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but this is the right decision for me. How'd you convey that to them such that you kept this really good relationship?
So I remember the day very well that I resigned from my position. I invited Ron to lunch. We went to a nice steakhouse in Uptown. We sat down. There's no perfect moment to say it, so I just went straight to it. And Ron got up and left. He just left me sitting there. And he was gone for 15 minutes or so. I thought, I don't know if he's going to come back. So he took it very hard, and then he came back and talked about what can we do to make this an environment where it will work for you. And ultimately, as we talked through that issue, he recognized, and it was deeply personal, because if you know Ron White, you know how personal it is to him to make sure that he's giving young lawyers opportunities to develop. So to hear me say, I think I've hit the ceiling, and that I don't know that there are more opportunities for me to do more than what I've been doing, and I need that. And for him to feel that he couldn't offer the additional opportunities, it was a tough moment. But to his credit, ultimately, he respected that I had to make this decision to expand myself, and he knew that I had some potential that was unrealized, and he wanted to see that for me as well. So we maintained a relationship over the years, and continued to have a mentor relationship, and it's just been a wonderful time having a relationship with him and Kevin. And it was a lot easier to tell Kevin, but Ron took it a little bit difficult.
And I'd imagine you actively worked to make sure you maintained that relationship.
Yes, yes. And this is something that you all will have to deal with if you haven't already, which is when you join a new firm, especially at that level, they are looking for you to bring a book of business. And so there's this moment, I think most lawyers have it, but I particularly had this moment where I had this deep devotion to the firm and the mission of the firm to develop itself into the largest minority-owned firm in the state, and yet there were some clients who were going to follow me over to Gruber Hurst, and that was difficult because you feel like and my friends are still here, and I'm taking their work with me, and it's a difficult thing to do, and you just are trying to figure out the best way to navigate that, but everybody knows that that's a part of our profession, and the clients get to decide who their lawyers are. And to the extent that they decided that they wanted me to continue to handle their cases and went with me, I was grateful that Ron and Kevin didn't take that too personal. at least after a few months.
I can just see you sitting at that restaurant by yourself.
It was a rough moment, yeah.
Okay, so you talked about moving over to Gruberhurst and the stakes of the litigation, the high stakes nature of the litigation, the clients who were extremely involved. And I know you had a number of trial experiences we've talked about, but can you share maybe one or two sort of moments of, yes, I made the right decision, where you really got that experience that you were looking for?
Wow, there were so many moments like that. I mean, it was an extraordinary place, and when I went over there, you know, had already made partner at one firm, and so as Michael and I were talking about the details of my employment with the new firm, we came to, you know, how will you come over? Will you come over as a partner? Will you come over as something else? And going into the Gruberhurst firm, I was going to be the only African-American attorney there, and I felt a little bit nervous that if I went over as a partner and I looked on the website and I saw that there were other lawyers who were at my level in terms of the years that they were out of law school who had not made partner. And I felt nervous that I would have a target on my back if I went over as a partner and they had been working with these folks for many years and had not made it to the partnership. So Michael and I discussed it, and I told him my comfort level is to come over as senior counsel and earn partnership. And so in terms of the opportunities then that were presented that really affirmed that this was a good decision for me, aside from my paycheck, but other than that, it was the moments in trial. There were times where I would be in trial with Michael and I would just take out a blank file folder and I would just write in it everything that he was doing that I thought was extraordinary. And I would fill literally both sides of the folder with things that I thought, wow, this is incredible. And so those were really affirming moments because I knew then I'm getting exactly what I came for. But there was one, Michael and I tried a number of cases together, and there was one particular trial that we had where we were in trial for several weeks, and it was a business case involving a notable author who had been disparaged, and we were representing him in this case against a very prominent PR firm. And when we got to the point of getting ready to try the case, you know, I talked to Michael about the fact that I really wanted to have a very significant role in this trial. I had spent a lot of time with this client. There was a key witness in the case I'd spent a lot of time with, and it was just no problem. It was a no-brainer to him that it would go exactly that way. And if you work with Michael, you know that he has more of a style of co-trying cases rather than I'm the lead and this is my sidekick. And so that's really wonderful for you because you really do get a lot of experience in that way. But a key moment came when I was doing the closing argument in that case, and we were trying that case in the 298th in front of my now colleague, Judge Tobolowsky. And I remember well when it was time for the closing arguments, she said, "Mr. Hurst, are you ready to proceed?" And he said, "Ms. Parker will be doing the closing." And she denies it, but I saw a little smirk on her face. I did. I saw just a little hint of female pride in that moment. This young lady is going to do the closing arguments in a case that's been on trial for 3 weeks with a mammoth amount of evidence and a 90-minute closing, or 75-minute closing. Yeah, I like this. Judge Tobolowsky denies it, but it was there. But that moment, and so she looked at me and she said, and in a comment to all the people who were gathered in the gallery, and what I didn't know is that Michael had called every member of the partnership in the firm and every associate to come over to the courthouse to watch me do this closing argument. And I didn't know that they were considering me at that time for partnership. And he didn't want to just be conveying to them in meetings, this is what she's capable of. He wanted them to see. And so Judge Tobolowsky looked at me and she said, "Well, Ms. Parker, you may proceed. You have quite an audience here." And I just stood up and I looked at her and I said, "Thank you, Your Honor. There are only 12 people in this room. May I proceed?" And I just went for it. And And it was just a wonderful moment where Michael was giving me a platform to not only excel as a professional, but also to sell myself to his then partners that later became my partners on, what he was seeing and experiencing and working with me. And that moment just has stayed with me forever.
I love that story. So you talked about the decision and discussion that you and Michael had when you came over. I want to go back to that for a moment because there is the hard work, the grit, the time, the political capital that you put into making partner, and people wear that like a badge.
Right.
And you not only left the firm that you had been with, but then went over as senior counsel to a brand new firm. How did you kind of check your ego to make that happen, knowing that there was a greater something down the road?
When you are working the way that we were, it's hard really to have ego because you're so tired, frankly. It was, as you know, it was extraordinary, the journey that we had while I was there. But it just was real easy to stay grounded because you're learning so much. So there's always a recognition that I still have room to grow. I still have ways that I can be better. And then you're practicing with people who are at the top of their game. And so you're looking at other people and there's still more to push for. And that was, the method for me is that when you're surrounded by people who are really doing well and working really hard, that's what keeps me grounded both then and now.
So then at some point, even though you enjoyed the great feeling of being an advocate, and you continue to be that in different forums, even though you're now on the bench, but you made a decision to step out of advocacy and go on to the judiciary. And how did you make that decision? And then I want you to talk about the conversation with Michael about your leaving, which I'm quite sure went kind of similar to your Ron White conversation.
Yes. Well, after being at Gruber Hearst for several years and then, deciding that I wanted to press on to pursue the bench, there was just, there were moments where I loved the work that I was doing. The same type of clients that I wanted to go over to represent, they were starting to wear on me, to be honest with you. They're extremely high maintenance. They're not, my clients in Fortune 500 corporations, they would be fine with my regular updates every 30 days. These folks are like texting at 2 in the morning going, what's going on with this and that, so it's a very different environment. But even the other aspect of it is the lawyers on the other sides of the cases were very different. And all of it was wonderful experience for me, and it certainly helped me to expand as a professional, but it also put me in a place where I started to think more about what do I want to do? What contribution do I want to make to our profession? We had one client, Mr. Childers will recall well, this client who had me in the conference room, and he brought in a picture of a WWF wrestler, and he puts it up, and he looks at me and he said, you're like real smooth. I want you to be like this. I'm not a WWF wrestler. I'm never gonna be like that, and I don't wanna be like that. Excuse me, let me get Mr. Hearst for you. And to Michael's credit, he went in and said, hey, what are you doing? No, we don't do that. That's not who we want her to be, and that sort of thing. But the point is that, once I had that experience for several years, I said, this is great. I got all these great experiences. What am I going to do to contribute to the profession in a way that really has meaning to me? And I have to admit, I was a little bit, I don't want to say sad. It wasn't quite that bad, but I definitely was disenchanted with the level of professionalism and civility that I was encountering in our profession. And it was concerning to me that people were being unnecessarily, I believe our system is an adversarial system, but it doesn't have to be contentious. That's on us to decide to take it to that place. And it was too often that. And I thought, the contribution that I can make is to promote civility and professionalism. And so what's the best way for me to do that? And I felt confident that being on the bench would give me an opportunity to do that, both because I would get to exemplify it on a platform, but I would also get to require it in the environment in which people would practice. And so that was a big part of what propelled me forward. Talking to Michael, it was sort of, it was a weird experience because he was extremely supportive. I was like, hey, don't you like working with me? Why are you so supportive? What's going on? But he was just magnificent, and he recognized that my personality was one that this was a natural progression for me from a career standpoint. He knew how much I love being in the courtroom. He knew how much I love, intense practice of law, interesting and intricate legal issues. And so he was just on board and, in fact, committed himself to helping me find a great treasurer, which we did do. And we were just off to the races, and he was supportive all throughout the process.
So we've talked about a number of folks that impacted your career, who you had the privilege to be partners with, practice with, who kind of helped shape your trial practice and your experiences. We talked about Ron White. We talked about Kevin Wiggins. We talked about Michael Hurst. You are an extreme advocate, not only for all lawyers, but particularly for women lawyers. And so as a woman lawyer, who else may have contributed to sort of the type of judge and advocate prior to that you were, and were there any women that were along the way that did that?
Quite a few women, but women contributed in different ways because what we get to be is an example and a model. And so a lot of times people would be my role models and they had no idea. I'm just watching the way that they move through the world. I'm just watching the way that they develop their practices. There are other people that I would call and meet with. Kim Askew is one of them that I would regularly call and meet with and reach out to and get information. Judge Purdy, who at one point was the president of one of our sister bar associations, was another person. And so I just had a lot of women who just, like you would shape clay and mold clay, that's what they did for me and would help me to correct or to move in the directions. And then, I have to say, you are definitely somebody who continues to cause me to push the envelope, because what I always know about you is you're bringing your A game, if not triple A game. One of the most special things about being on the bench when Sean comes to argue a hearing is watching the face of the person on the other side while she's arguing. You have to kind of keep yourself, like, wow, this is interesting to see the face of the person who's over there, because everybody who encounters Ms. Brown knows that she is coming to have it buttoned up from start to finish. She's the one who's going to argue the motion and the reply at the same time. You know those people? You know those people. Like, can you just wait till I make my argument to say all the rest of that? So she does that. But folks like Sean, and Sean in particular, do help me to continue to push that envelope and have been sources of modeling for me of who and what I want to be in different aspects of my professional and personal life.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Mutual indeed. So we talked about a lot of changes that you've had, different firms, ascending to the bench, and you've had a few recent changes in your personal life lately.
Yes.
When you want to talk about that and how you're managing that new role that you've taken on.
Well, I have two
new roles
that I've taken on in the last year because I got married and I have a baby. And it's just been an extraordinary run. I don't have words for it. Those of you who have been momming for a long time, my hat is off to you. There's no doubt, it is the hardest thing I've ever done. And one of the beauties of having my son, Kason, is that it makes everything else easy, really. Things that are like really hard, things that I thought were really, really hard, like this job. this puts it in perspective because, you know, when you're responsible for making sure somebody lives and breathes and learns and develops, it kind of puts things in perspective. So it's just been a wonderful experience. Miss Mosley, you know, was somebody who had a hearing on my docket. We adopted Kaysen, and when we got the call, I mean, it all went very quickly. And when we got the call, I obviously, I left work Friday. I was not a mom. When I came back on Monday, I was. So it just kind of all happened. So I had a full docket. I had trial scheduled. I had all these things going on, and I did my best to try to meet the responsibilities of my job. And one of the things that I had on the docket was a hearing in a case that Miss Mosley had in the court. And I remember calling and saying, yeah, so I'm not exactly sure how to. Okay, so I'm not going to be able to handle you guys hearing this week because I got some things going on. And Miss Mosley and opposing counsel in that case, they were wonderful and very supportive and were very helpful in terms of us moving it so that I could have some time to figure out what I was doing, which was delightful. But it's just been a wonderful experience to walk in every day and see his face. There's just nothing like it. Although getting out the door in the morning is very, very different, very different.
So you've always been a runner, very committed to making sure you stayed physically active. How have you managed trying to keep yourself going, not only with physical activity, sort of that health that you get from that, your new role as a mom and a wife, and obviously a judge on probably very little sleep?
Yeah. The sleep thing is much better now. It was very difficult initially, but it's much better. In terms of, you know, trying to create balance, and I hesitate to use that word because there's a woman named Natalie Arbaugh who is a lawyer here in town at Winston-Strawn, and she taught me recently the term work-life integration, which I think is a better term because there's no balance, and we should just stop saying that. It just gives us something else to fail at. But we can integrate the two, and so that's really what I try to do. There are days where I'm not successful at it, and I just try to go easy on myself when I'm not as successful at it as I want to be. But that's the key for me, is just trying to figure out a way to integrate it. I remember well one of the days where I was really excited. The bar poll ratings had come out, and I was really excited about it. And I was on the phone with my mom, and I shared the ratings with her. And she said, "What do you think would be the ratings if you got rated in those categories at your house?" Okay.
As only a mother can.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking about that, Mom, exactly that way, but now that you bring it up, maybe there would be some differences. Okay, so we need to make some adjustments. And, you know, so now I've tried to make appropriate adjustments, but I have to tell you, because I wasn't pregnant and, you know, carried a baby for 9 months, I had the luxury of being able to be open or not about being a new mom. So for a long time, people didn't even know. And one day I had a moment where I said, "Are you being closeted about being a mom? What is going on here? Are you like keeping this on the low on purpose?" And I had that moment, and then of course I had to ask why. Well, why are you doing that? And I was sad at the response, and the response was to myself that because I know that we are still at a place in society where when we become moms, people think we're not committed to our jobs. They don't think we're going to perform at a high level in our jobs. They, in fact, expect that we're going to fall off. And in addition to the wedding and the baby and all that, I also was up for reelection. And I was launching my reelection for my 3rd term, and I thought, well, now's not the time to have people thinking I'm not committed to my job, so we ought to just not be talking about this. And then I just realized, no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do it that way. I am extremely proud of my family, and any opportunity I get to talk about them, I will. And there is a challenge with trying to integrate these things, but that's the new challenge. It's just like all the others. It's a challenge, and it is the new challenge, and it is one that I push for and towards every day to conquer it, just like everything else.
I think that's great advice. I love the story about sort of how to handle that, and just putting a plug. Jennifer talked about the different conversations that will happen in addition to this one. A point of personal privilege that Justice Langmeyers was a partner at my firm when I was pregnant with my first child, and she was almost equally as excited as most of my family, which was great, because I was very nervous about this new role that I was about to take on and how that would affect my career. And she's going to be interviewed in a later conversation by both of her children, who are also practicing attorneys, who I, in a very full circle way, got to mentor one of them. But she said to me when I told her I was pregnant, and I observed how she practiced law and was also a great mother at the same time, and seemed to me always at the top of her game on both fronts. She said, you know, when I leave this world, if it says that I was a really great lawyer and just a good mom, then I haven't done my job. But if it says I was a great mom and a good lawyer, then I'm good with that. And that has been something that I've tried to integrate, I like that new word, into what I've done. So I appreciate her for that. And like you said, we have so many people that we have modeled ourselves after, and at least just sort of tried to follow. We
Let
have
me just add one other thing about that. You know, for folks who are in the leadership at your firms, I was talking to a young man today. He came by the court just to say hello and to let me know he hadn't fallen off the face of the earth, because he's a regular at the courthouse. But I hadn't seen him in a while, and he came by, said hello, and he said, I've been on paternity leave. And I was like, wow, man, that's great. I'm really happy that you took that time with your child. And one of the things that we talked about is how important it is at law firms for, if you have paternity leave, one, you should have paternity leave, and two, you should mandate it. That is to say, if you have paternity leave, but there's so much stigma that men suffer for taking it, then effectively you don't have paternity leave, and you create greater stigma for women who take maternity leave. So if we're all having to take a break when the baby comes, then I think that people are more respectful of the fact that that's just a necessary part of the cycle of life and a part of the process. And I was grateful to hear that he did, but I would encourage you to consider mandatory paternity leave at your firms. There are all sorts of studies out there that say even when paternity leave is offered, men don't take it because they fear stigma from the folks who are their bosses and from their colleagues who are their associates, and we have to change that.
Great point. So I think we're about to close, but I know Jennifer wanted us to sort of end with any words of advice or last things that you would want to share with our amazing group that has been so great to listen to us. So I'll give you that opportunity.
Gosh, it's hard to sift through everything and come up with, you know, one final point. But as a trial judge, I have to say I want to see more of you at the courthouse. I had a young lady who was in trial with me maybe 2 weeks ago, and she rarely stood. She passed a lot of Post-it notes. She knew everything about the case. And they settled the case in the middle of, well, really after days of trial, they settled the case. And afterwards, I invited her back into my chambers, and I just told her, you're amazing. You're amazing. Get to your feet. Get to your feet in this environment. There's no reason for you to be relegated to the role of passing notes. And my sense was that that was a role she was embracing. It wasn't a situation where the male that was trying the case was, you know, wanting to do everything, but that she was satisfied to be in that role. And as we had the conversation, that came out, in that, you know, she just had her reasons where she had always just sort of seen herself as a behind the scenes person. And I would just encourage you to resist the temptation to fall into the role of a work spouse, to fall into the role of a daddy's girl, for those of you who have, you know, a lot of age difference between your more senior attorney supervisors and you. Resist the temptation and really try to find your place as an independent professional who is making your contribution and who wants to have a speaking role in the courtroom every opportunity you get. And you have to ask for it, and you have to tell people, because often in our society, people just assume that we're okay to sit back. as women. And unless we say otherwise, that's the assumption that's made. And so it's not always other people's fault that we're not getting the opportunity to stand and be present. Sometimes, a lot of times, it's because that's what we're accepting for ourselves, because we have this view that that's what we're good at. And she was good at the Post-it notes and the records. And I mean, anything I said to him, she was like, here it is, there it is, there it is. Look at this. And then he would be saying things that weren't true, and she would go, and, you know, like, y'all have done that before. So she was phenomenal. But my thing is, if you've got all the knowledge, just stand up. And if you've practiced in front of me, you know that I am apt to say, Miss So-and-so, you may address the court, because this is crazy. I don't say that part, but definitely, just get up. You can say it, but and so definitely just think about that and just step into who you were meant to be, the reason you went to law school, and realize your potential.
I love that. So in typical Judge Parker fashion, she covered the one question I didn't get to in her advice, because that's just how prepared she always is. So I really have enjoyed our talk. We get to talk on occasion when I don't have many active cases in your court, but this has been particularly fun, so thank you.
Head nod to Oprah, please.
Here we go. I will say I've been on the receiving end of one of those situations, so Judge Parker is true to her word on that. Thank you both. You're both such a treasure, and it's our treat to have heard from you today. Thank you. Sean gave an excellent plug for our next interview. Justice Langmeyers will be interviewed by her kiddos. I say that, but they're grown, grown, successful attorneys. So mark your calendars. That will be June the 6th, right here at the Belo at noon. Thank you all so much.
Wait, I want to do one shameless plug. The National Association of Women Lawyers is having their annual conference here in Dallas. It's going to be on May 3rd at the Highland Hotel, so please go on to their website, nawl.org, and try to get more information about it. I have the pleasure of being able to open the conference this year with a local TED Talk that I did, and so I hope that I'll get a chance to see you all there.